District 7 Board of Education special meeting. Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Delariva.
Here.
Brumback. Here. Fund. Here. Sanderson. Here. Patey.
Here.
Ahart.
Here.
Proctor. Here. Trotta. Here. Burgos.
I'd like to welcome our visitors to tonight's special meeting of the school board, and then at this time I will ask all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will entertain a motion to approve the February 10th, 2025 special agenda as it has been presented this evening.
So move. Second. I'll take it second.
Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Brumback.
Yes.
Fund.
Yes.
Delariva.
Yes.
Sanderson.
Yes.
Patey.
Yes.
Ahart.
Yes.
At this time, the board has set aside time for anyone wishing to address the board. Okay. Nobody. All right, well, let's move on to the discussion items. We have two for tonight. The first one is the strategic plan Goal 2 report. And at this time, I would like to welcome Dr. Brian Lane, Director of Human Resources, to discuss with the board a strategic plan Goal 2 report.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shelton and members of the board. I'd like to give you an update this evening on where we are in terms of status and work that has been done around the strategic plan Goal 2, which is under the overall heading of thriving workforce. So please feel free as we go through this to jump in at any time with questions. We don't have to wait till the end for those. Here's the overall goal statement. You'll know the key areas to that is recruiting, retaining, and supporting. Obviously, we want our staff to be high quality, and then also denoting the need for a diverse workforce that matches our students as well. So objective 1 talks about a few key areas: developing an employee recruitment program, once again that reflects our staff, students, and community. Also a substitute recruitment program. At the time it was written and ongoing, as you know, always looking to get quality substitutes in the classroom and meet that need. And then also looking at developing a grow your own program for long-term employees. So throughout this, I'll be talking a little bit more about our need for growing our own leaders in the district and the need for succession planning down the road. I think that's going to be critical for D7 and our sustained growth down the road. So the key metrics, as you know, as board members, that we've talked about these recently when we looked at some of the recruitment pieces, particularly around substitute teachers. We talked, currently we've had to be using some of our internal staff, such as our instructional coaches and our kindergarten interventionists, to cover classrooms when we're not able to get enough substitute teachers. On average, looking back over the past 18 months, we've been using them an average of 12 and a half times a month. So the goal around this would be to reduce that to 6 or less times per month. Ultimately, I would be reporting back to the board for the first time at the end of this school year to see if any of the measures that we've put into place have impacted this number. The second piece, and you're going to see a few of these in here with me being new to the role this year, that I'm looking for some baseline data in order to move these objectives to the next level. So one thing that I'm going to be tracking starting this year and going forward is what is the average number of applicants? And should have put in there with the misnomer with the qualified applicants, people that meet the job description. For applications both for certified and for classified positions, then I would, my goal would be to track those over time and ultimately put a SMART goal around amount of applicants, qualified applicants that we're getting for positions. So that's going to be a work in progress. So a couple of on all of these, I'd like to give you a status of where we're at in the moment. In terms of substitute teacher pool, we're actually up 25 subs in the pool, so that's a positive development. We have had some increased outages this year, so it's still not enough, if you will, and that's why we've kind of taken some of those latest measures to take a look at that. Last year, the district held their first career fair, which was a very big success, and multiple candidates were actually hired out of the pool. We have one, I'm of course continuing that, so we have that coming up actually on February 19th. We've already got 43 people coming in for that, and I think that will rise to well over 50 applicants. So that's going to be nice to have a really good pool of candidates that we can be very agile and already have them fully screened and ready to take through our process.
How many vacancies do we have right now for next year?
In terms of retirees, right now we have 7 retirees across, so it's really very small historically.
Okay.
Obviously, we're still going to be looking and trying to see what attrition rate is likely to be in a district of our size.
Okay.
And then another piece to this is Dr. Shelton hosts a leadership academy. They meet regularly, and this is for our aspiring administrators in the district. So that's a great piece where he mentors them and really helps us to have that potential pool. I know we've taken advantage of that in the past. I'll talk a little bit more about, as you can see from a couple of our latest hirings of principals, and I can tell you from my past districts as well, that pool is getting smaller and smaller of qualified candidates. So the more that we can really grow our own, I think it's going to be necessary, frankly, to get really great candidates. Objective 2, this is a really key one, improving the retention rate of our employees. You're going to hear throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about the importance of retention, just the way it impacts an organization in a variety of ways, everything from financial to, obviously academic achievement of students. Another piece of this was conducting exit interviews for all employees leaving the district. That's a great tool to have in place. You can get some good, honest feedback if you're asking the right questions to try to see why are people leaving. Obviously, there's a big difference between, my wife got a new job in another state versus I wasn't treated well, or I didn't feel respected, I didn't feel a sense of belonging in the organization. So those are the kind of telltale things I'm going to be looking for to build action steps around. And then another piece was an action step was developing employee support groups for underrepresented staff. Dr. Smith currently has 2 groups going. She has one for persons of color, and she has another LGBTQ support group as well. She's also looking at the possibility of a veteran support group, which I think would be wonderful to move on that possibly. So just trying to really wrap around those supports for all our people in every way we can. So the metrics on this, these are the retention rates that we have to report to the state. I think as we get more years of this, we could definitely pretty soon, I think, put a true SMART goal around that in terms of is a reasonable, obviously at this point it's just increase it. But at some point, I think we can start looking at, hey, what's a reasonable thing? We've got action steps in place. Is 1% reasonable to start moving the needle on those retention rates, which makes a huge difference in your school district.
Are these the same rates that get reported for the scorecard?
They are.
How are they calculated? Are they just for that individual year, or are they an average over a number of years?
These are individual years.
Okay.
So the status on this, the district has done a lot of work on how do we retain our employees. So while it's not necessarily the most important thing, we all know that pay and benefits certainly plays into whether people are going to stay with an organization. So you can see, I'll start with our benefit. We offer an excellent benefit package here in D7. You can see that it's over $10,000 for a full-time employee. So we always try to emphasize that with our people to help them understand just how much above and beyond, especially when you're maybe you're a young teacher or a young classified employee, to realize just how important that is. So you can see also how do we compare to the state. Across the state, they pay an average of 81% of insurance costs, while if you work 37 and a half hours or more here in D7, you get paid 100% of your insurance paid, which is a really excellent benefit. And then another key piece to it is we have very low deductibles, $1,000. You frequently...
It's not even heard of in the state.
Thank
It's
you.
really good.
Yes, it's very good. You frequently see, while you see the state average is $1,868,
Still
it's
good.
not uncommon to see $3,000 or more, and in a lot of the high deductibles. And then, of course, in terms of the certified salaries, the district has done a lot of work in the past years to remain competitive, and we'll look at a couple slides here in a moment to show that we are competitive with our Madison County school districts. And then we're also going to take, we can also look at, in terms of the classified salaries, we've really done a lot of work, particularly in the last few years, to really look at food service was a key one, custodians was a key one, and assistants, our paraprofessionals and our assistants. So we'll take a look at those. So here you can see in terms of starting salary, and then as you know, in comparing salary schedules, they can get kind of apples to oranges sometimes, so you got to get a little deeper into them. You can see that you have some districts that will allow someone to stay on a bachelor's step for 25 steps. Where at 18 we're going to cap them, which I find is much more common, and typically that you're going to cap those. But then it plays into it too, because we also have I feel a very reasonable salary schedule in terms of 25 steps that they're able to max out in that. You'll see some other school districts, while that top end looks really good, they could be at 32 years and a doctoral level, and it's like, well, yeah, that looks great to say you can max out at 105 grand, but on the other hand, tell me how many teachers you have that are getting to 32 years with a doctorate. So I find it a lot more relevant, and really where we're strong is where you look at where a lot of people actually are on the schedule. When you look at your teachers, they might have a master's 15 and 10 or 15 years of service, and in those categories, we're very competitive.
How many of your staff have a master's or higher? I know it's on the report card, I can't.
I know it was a high percentage, but I don't have it. I'll have to get it to you, Jennifer.
Okay, it's fine, I can look on the report card.
here's your salary comparison, just so you can, actually, these are just our starting and max hourly wages. So for my own edification, I called around to some local businesses, because you often hear, like, say in food service, that, well, you can go to, fast food and make more than this. And, we've been doing very well in finding food service workers. And what I found by just calling some local, a few different, chains and fast food places, is we were actually either right at or higher than all the places I called. And then I was curious about when we looked at the assistants, so I actually called some local daycares and got their rates as well. And once again, we were, about $1.50 higher than most of the daycares. And we have actually been doing a good job of finding a lot of assistants this year. So I thought that was good to know. On there, I did put most, because, realistically, there's a couple that we'll always be continuing to address. I can give you an example, like maintenance. You start talking, if you're trying to find like an HVAC person, they're difficult to find, because they can go to the private and they're gonna make more than $29.75 an hour, so.
So these all have benefits too, all these?
Full
Whereas
benefits.
Other restaurants, they typically don't?
It depends, some of them do.
I know management usually does, but I didn't know if line staff did.
They're starting to add it more and more. I was a little surprised to see your McDonald's of the world, and some of those do have, I don't know how good the insurance is, but they do offer insurance and things of that nature.
So, but with our I'm sorry,
Well, go ahead.
but with our insurance, they still have the opportunity to have the same insurance that you discussed in the previous slide.
They do,
Okay.
they do. So it's excellent. I mean, I
Yeah.
gotta feel that ours would be much better, but I don't know that for a fact.
So on average, so let's take a food service, someone who's working in food service, hourly wise, how many hours would they average a week?
We have people across the board. I mean, we do have some that are just 3 or 4 hours a day, but we have others that are 7 hours a day and, get in 35 hours a week.
And what percentage of the IMRF are we paying for employees?
We pay, I believe this year, Dave can correct me, I thought we were at 6.
Do you know the answer to that, Dave? The employees pay their they pay their 4.5.
Okay, I knew it was the match, so.
So they're paying into a pension system?
Yes.
Okay.
They are. And they can, side note, and we always tell them this, if they ever leave before the 10 years that they're vested, they can apply to IMRF and get all their money back out of that. So they don't lose money to IMRF, they just don't get the match, if you will, from the district.
So you're not tenured until you're here 10 years?
10 years in any IMRF institution, even if they switch. So it's still very nice. I mean, it's still a pension system,
Yeah,
and
'cause
we
this
all,
day and age,
we all know that those are few and
Rare,
far between nowadays.
Was that calculated in that other benefits? On the previous screen, you had other benefits, over $10,000. Was pension payment part of that?
No, that was not included as part of that.
So we do
It's a good point.
some pension work on addition to that?
That's a good
Okay.
point. So as we all know, salary and benefits, while they're very important, your research will show that is not necessarily what keeps someone in a position in a district. So we've focused a lot on the culture and climate. And while we'll get down to some of the fun recognitions and celebrations, and I think we do a good job of those in the district, not only what I believe, but what the research will show you is what truly keeps people in their positions, particularly, I feel, in the educational field, is knowing that what they're doing is worthwhile. They know that, you know, they're a valued part of the organization, that you're going back like we frequently do and really talking about why we're doing what we're doing, and not just with the teachers, but with our secretaries and with our custodians and our maintenance folks, and really all understanding that, you know, this is the why. The kids are the why, and it's very clear cut. And I think that's really what, you know, what's going to drive someone to keep coming back to work and to not go somewhere else, or to leave education, as so many are have been doing the past years, unfortunately. So how are we prioritizing trust, respect, gratitude, integrity, taking care of our people? I think we do a good job. We can continue to keep this in mind. You know, you have nowadays, well, we probably always should have, but being mindful of the work-life balance with our people, that they do have families, that they do have things outside of us, and we always want to try to work with them on those things and be respectful of that. And then once you take care of all those big ticket items, then I feel like then you can also really do a lot of the fun things, the celebrations, the recognitions, the team building. I can tell you, since I've been here, I've actually learned a lot about some of those things. We do a better job here than, you know, than the district I was in charge of. That sounds bad, but no, I think we really do a good job of just a lot of the little things, and it's been impressive to see at the buildings. You know, just the fun activities they do. They do everything. I mean, everything from scavenger hunts to gift exchanges. You know, the recognizing of the milestones and the birthdays and the baby showers and things that, you know, it sounds like the little things. You know, I'll use myself as an example. You know, I got a little get together for my birthday recently at the office, which was very nice, and a very nice brunch, though, you know, and on my birthday, you know, I got a card in the mail from Patrick, a personally signed card, and I'm just like, wow. I mean, it is little things, but you know, it does really make you feel like that you're part of something. So we can continue to do better, and we will. But I think that's a piece on that retention and why people want to be here and want to stay here. So the status. I recently wrote an exit survey over the last couple months. It's now on Thought Exchange, and so for every time that we have any employee certified classified leaving D7, I send them the link to that survey, ask them, you know, to please help us out. We can learn a lot from it. It's, you know, it's 8 or 10 questions with a little kind of AI component at the end. Ask some questions, just really asking, how were they treated? Why did they leave? Was there anything we could have done differently that would have kept them to stay? And then ultimately, and I think this could happen relatively quickly, I want to use the results from that to guide action steps around this particular objective. I think we can pull out some themes and strands relatively quickly to help guide what are those components. What, you know, is it in terms of those big ticket items I talked about, and, you know, ownership and how we're treating people, or you know, is it the salary and benefits part? Is it, you know, what is it? And so I just need to discover some of that. I talked about the employee support groups and the fact that we have the staff complete an annual job satisfaction survey. That'll be tracked, goals developed on the survey data. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more on objective, one of our later objectives as well, because we had a component of that last year, but I've expanded on it this year.
How do you use, or do you use the 5 Essentials survey at all in any of the sort of the climate?
We have looked at that previously. and we will be utilizing it this year. We're doing a lot of efforts around getting a better participation rate on that, and so I think we can tie that into the to the job satisfaction survey and pull pieces out of that. I think that's going to be key.
Okay, so the participation is low?
I think that was something they had to work on in the past. I don't know if it was low. They didn't get the full points for it in terms of IAR, correct? Objective 3 was about an orientation program, in particular for our classified employees, to put a more developed structure in place in terms of onboarding new employees classified. We have a very well-designed new teacher orientation that goes several days, and mentoring programs for 2 years. But unfortunately, I think this is common in many school districts, you didn't have nearly the supports for your classified people. Probably in some departments more so than others. Other ones, not to what we would like those to be. So the status of that is, first off, previously people came to the onboarding sessions or process when they were able to. Now it's a required part of the process. And so we have a couple parts to that. They have one introductory day that's led by myself and some of our friends from the business department, and we talk about everything from kind of the 10,000-foot view of benefits and salary and how do you get direct deposit, but also key policies and procedures for the district and public schools trainings and those kind of pieces. But that's just that piece. And then where I've been doing work with the department heads on is we're calibrating on then what happens consistently on that first day that they come to work with you. And what we've decided is for a minimum of 1 day, really is going to depend on the employee and the position on what they need, but they would basically be coached and follow along with a district employee and be trained throughout that day. It could be up to 3 days that we talked about in certain positions. A lot of it depends on their prior experience and what the job entails. And then finally coming out of that, and I plan to have this done by this April, it will be a formal onboarding manual for each job where it's a checklist of things that have to happen on those first days on the job and throughout the first year in the position, so that we can make sure that those are happening and they get signed off on so that we're fully supporting our people. What I don't want to happen is, you hear these stories, not necessarily here, but of a custodian that kind of just, they point them to the cleaning supplies and say, this part of the building's yours, and we'll see you in the morning. So we obviously don't want that to happen, because someone is not going to stick around in a job if they're feeling that they're not supported or don't have the ability to do a job well. All right, Objective 4 comes back to the key parts of surveying employees to determine job satisfaction, and then developing that action plan around that. So the key metrics around this is just that we are going to track that satisfaction rate and publicize that, and then basically last year was the first year that they asked a couple of key questions around that satisfaction. So we do have, we had a number last year, it was 71%. So while I have expanded that survey to have several more questions in it, I did ask the same questions in there as well, so we can use that as a comparative data point, and we can track that ongoing in terms of what is that overall satisfaction rate of our employees.
Without getting too deep into the survey, are there questions in there that ask about how staff, teachers feel supported by their administrator, feel safe from outside, maybe not safety coming from outside accusations, being in the classroom, if you have 125 students, you have 125 different points of view on what the right way to run a classroom is. So, do you ask questions related to that within the survey?
There are questions around, the administrative part in terms of, do you feel supported by your administrator? Do you feel that, your opinions are valued? Do you feel comfortable, expressing yourself? So all of those kind of emotional security and belongingness questions,
Okay.
not about the public or anything like that in there.
Okay.
Are they open-ended? Do they get a spot to respond to type in their response? It's not just a yes and no.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. In particular, I believe the last two questions on there are just, boxes that they can put in. It's very open-ended. What would you suggest in terms of being able to improve our ability to, improve teacher, employee satisfaction. So here I just talked about the status of that. I think it's going to be key once we're putting that out in the first week of this coming March, and then we're going to be able to put some comparative data around that and some action steps around that in terms of specifically looking to increase that staff retention.
So that staff retention, though, is fairly high. You said 92.6.
Higher than the state.
Right. Sorry? Okay.
But for every point, in that could make a huge difference to this, or half a point, whatever it might be, would make a huge difference to D7. So Dr. Shelton asked me if I had any kind of final takeaways kind of overall from this goal and a little bit from my time in the district. And so a couple just thoughts is just that we need to put a lot of focus around retaining our employees. And I think we've done that, but we need to continue to really make that a priority in the district. And this is a nationwide issue, as you know, with shortages in education. So, just from a very pragmatic viewpoint, it's a huge financial cost to the district. A lot of studies will show it's somewhere in the area of a $25,000 loss every time that you lose a certified employee. And, that seems very realistic to me when you start thinking about all the training that we do, all the professional development, all the soft cost of our coaches and people that are working with them. So there's that financial component to it. There is, are we then able to recruit people that are going to be at the same level going forward as the people that you lose? You've got the whole brain drain and the loss of, that kind of institutional knowledge that you lose every time someone leaves your organization. And then, of course, the number one thing, what is that impact on student achievement? Just in losing that stability and those factors, and of course, whether you're getting the same level of employees going forward. So, every time that we retain an employee, we support a new teacher. The research will also show you if you can get a teacher through their first 3 years in the classroom feeling supported and doing pretty well, a lot of times you can keep them in the profession. But large percentages are leaving the profession within the first 3 to 5 years of being in the classroom. So everything that we can do to support, and there's a lot of talent. They're not leaving because they wouldn't have been good teachers in many cases. So we just have to really focus on that. That's a key piece. And then another one is how can we prioritize growing our own in terms of that leadership development? Because as I mentioned earlier, what we're clearly seeing in leadership roles is, it wasn't too many years ago that I would post for a principal in one of my districts, and it wasn't uncommon to get 30 qualified candidates, like legit candidates. And in recent years, even in high-paying districts, it was more in the 5 to 10 range in many cases, and where you'd get down to often 1 or 2 viable candidates. And I had friends in neighboring districts that were having worse results than that. So this isn't an issue that is going to go away. You have many people that are looking to move into many of these leadership and principal roles for a variety of reasons that we won't go into, but it's a tough job for a lot of people. So the more that we can build up our own people internally, while we're always going to want to mix, I'm a big fan personally of grow your own, but also look for opportunities to bring in different thoughts and experiences and backgrounds. But to have a good mix of that, I think is optimal. And then also really looking, we got to think long term here. You saw with our recent experience of looking at the high school principalship. So how can we have, and this is going to be a good one for us to take a look at down the road as Alex eventually at some point unfortunately will want to do something else. And we need to be planning well in advance of that time to not just say, hey, 3 months and we'll throw out the application and hope we get a good one. So that's going to be just something that's been on my mind a lot.
So you had mentioned about the retention, and I agree. It's much better to retain than do exit interviews. But you'd also mentioned earlier that we're relying more on internal staffing to fill some of these voids. So based on your numbers that you're saying that we have like an 89% retention, but are we understaffed?
No, that was an issue, Scott, where we have, and this is not a practice that we do want to move away from, is where we're not able to get enough subs on certain days, and then we're pulling some of our internal coaches or interventionists just to cover, say, a 3rd grade classroom because we don't have a choice. So it's not a great practice, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the coaches don't, of course, they're wonderful, they help us out, but of course they want to be doing their actual jobs.
But retention also goes into that sub pool also. We want to be able to retain that talent that we have even there. Are we putting forth something to maintain that?
In terms of not utilizing those people, I didn't follow, Scott, I'm sorry.
So if we're using internal staff for subs, I think we talked about it before where we're having to use SIU last year. Do we have a pool that we're pulling from? And if so, are we making sure they're compensated properly so we can keep that pool?
Like the SIU student teachers?
You're talking about the substitute teacher pool. So that it's increased from 90 to 2024 to a current pool of 115. But you were saying that maybe that's insufficient?
Certain days. I mean, we are covering it on many days, but there are days where we have high absences that we're struggling still.
What
Scott,
days
and
are
with-
those?
Was your question about compensation for substitutes?
No. When you're talking retention, people are leaving, all industries for varying reasons. when you're looking at a sub pool, that substitutes generally have something else going on. And, you know, part of, you know, as you had said, you know, do they feel appreciated? You know, anything, what are we doing to make sure that those people feel like, hey, this is something that I always want to keep in my back pocket? Are we, you know,
Yeah, we've been working a lot with the principals in terms of, well, for one, we've upped the training with our subs, because what we heard a lot of is, you know, they weren't necessarily feeling supported and comfortable with technology. So we've held some additional trainings with our tech coaches where all the subs come in, they spend some time, everything from kind of logging on to accessing the lesson plans. I've worked with the principals in terms of, you know, check in with them in the mornings, make sure they're set up in the room, you know, have someone in your building, secretary or someone, walk them to the room instead of kind of my example earlier. Don't just say, you know, I wouldn't want to be let loose at the high school personally trying to find a room. So, you know, please, you know, walk them to the room, make sure they're comfortable with the lesson plans, that they don't need anything. You know, do they have a buddy across the hall, a buddy teacher that can check in on them, make sure that they're doing okay? So we're really trying to do more of that kind of small district feel to how are we taking care of the subs? Do they feel a part of the organization? Because I think that's what really keeps them coming back more than, you know, $2 or $3 versus us versus a neighboring district.
And then we have a pool that are retired teachers that come and sub for us. Are you seeing those numbers fairly consistently year over year of teachers, retired teachers that return to sub?
Well, I only have been able to look this year and last year, and it seemed consistent. I mean, we do offer, it's a higher rate of pay, so I think that's a positive. That would have been one of my recommendations if we didn't have that already, so I haven't seen a large shift in that one way or another.
So one of the things that you talk about is that we have a nationwide problem too. And so that we just voted on the Vision 2030, and one of the tenets of the Vision 2030 was to really foster basically a thriving workforce within the state of Illinois. And that communication really comes from school board members across the state. So I think school board members across the state are also taking a hard look and asking the legislature to take a hard look at the retirement system as well, and making sure that we properly support that. And Lynn and I went down to Sparta. We talked to Terry Bryant, Amy Elick, and Erica Harris in October about TRS. And so I think, school board members have an opportunity to take an active part in supporting Goal 2, the thriving workforce.
Well, I appreciate your lobbying for that, because certainly Tier 2 is not an incentive for a 22-year-old. When you start looking at those amount of years in the system, they're not thinking that many years down the road. So that is going to be very difficult. You can, maybe with Tier 1 possibly, or certainly at some points, you can really talk to them and get them to understand what the benefits of a pension and how wonderful that can be. But yes, the Tier 2 is problematic.
Brian, one of the things you didn't mention that it wasn't in the slides, but the ISB has really opened up a lot of certification opportunities for people who may have an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree and want to go back and get certified, especially in the career and technical education fields and in special education. So both of those are areas where in special education, there are universities offering programs where you can work full-time all the way up until you get your degree, and you don't have to stop working to student teach, which I know is a big barrier for people who may have a family or may need an income. So we have actually some people that are partnering with McKendree in their program, and then we also have some people that have gotten CTE certificates that are really based on your industry hours of experience, not based on your education background. Now that comes with other challenges and ways that we need to support teachers, but we know that we're going to see that as a growing field of certification, especially as we start looking more at at incorporating the trades, technical areas, areas of certifications and licensures as in our high schools. That was my plug for anybody that's watching that wants to go back and teach is what it is.
It's a good commercial.
Those opportunities.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
No, it's just good to see the intentionality of the work being done for this school, so.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I guess the only thing that I'm gonna be a broken record, I bring this up, it seems like anytime we start talking about staff, but talking about the 5 essentials. You know, if you look at the scores across the state, I would really love to see those school districts that have schools that score really high on the 5 essentials and see if we can glean any best practices from what they do.
Absolutely.
Because I think, you know, there's a lot to learn from that.
It's a great point.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lane.
Thank you.
I'm gonna come over and grab the clicker real quick. All right, I'm going to jump ahead into a follow-up from our retreat. Wanted to circle back and just provide just a little bit more information and really recap some information on where we are with phase 2 projects for the bond. And so most of these slides are slides that the board saw during our retreat, just recapping kind of where we are with our EAV estimate, with our debt capacity, our legal debt margin, our debt service rate, and just reminding that our intent was that capital service debt rate stays at 80 cents or below. And you'll see a couple new slides in here that give you some more information related to that. Out of that $100 million bond that was issued in April 2023, the board can issue another $10,670,000 and still maintain that debt rate. We've also built capacity for additional health, life, safety projects if needed in 2026 or 2027 of budgeting $10 million. Again, maintaining that rate, and then another $40 million in 2029, and that's assuming a very conservative EAV increase over the course of those years. So when we met in retreat, we talked about just the overall revenue and kind of where we were. So we issued $89,330,000 in April of 2023, received bond premiums of $6,687,000, and had earned, as of the date this was pulled, $6,879,000 in interest. And we anticipated an additional $2.5 million in interest earned over the course of the 5 years of the bonds. If you remember, we talked about arbitrage and the arbitrage penalty of about $2 million. For us, that's a worst case scenario. So arbitrage is when you earn more interest than you're actually legally allowed to. And so when that happens, you have to pay a penalty to the IRS on that. And then we included the additional $10 million in bonds and anticipated interest of $500,000, which would put us at a total bond project of $118,566,000.
So is there a premium associated with the February 20?
We won't know that till the bond's issued.
Okay.
So that remains to be seen. The only thing we've done so far is we've had our bond rating call, and that was maintained at an A+.
Okay.
There we go. So as I mentioned, we've only used that $89 million, so we can issue that $10,670, and we will be recommending on February 24th, I think is our meeting, that we issue that $10,670, maintaining that tax rate.
So the tax rate would be 77 cents.
That's the current tax rate. I don't think, Dave, do you know the tax rate for next year off the top of your head? 74.
Oh, it's on the slide. It's on
Okay,
the slide.
there you go.
So
So I also
Okay.
thought that this information, this historical information was really important. This came from the recent bond status update, rating update that I shared with you just a second ago, showing each of the funds that we levy for. Because I think a lot of times this is the part that, especially even as a teacher taking school finance, as an administrator, you kind of get, it's like having 10 different checkbooks, right? It's kind of the way it works. And so it just gives you an idea of where the district's tax rate comes from and all of the different funds that we've historically levied for and where those come from. So that goes through 2023. So as we discussed, we had 3 potential phase 2 projects when we initially started this. We had our playgrounds, which we had decided early on to move to the O&M fund, not necessarily just for financial reasons. Some of our playgrounds are not going to be in the place that they need to be fully replaced before the end of the bond, and that is something that we can incorporate into our O&M budget as they need to come up. We also then talked about the Columbus Gymnasium and the decision to potentially delay that to 2029 or look at health, life, safety, depending on if that becomes an option, and then looking at a media center and the potential budget for the media center. Now, if you remember early in the bond, when we started space planning each of our projects, they were really kind of boxes with square footages and cost averages. And so that's where we are right now with the media center. Based on early space planning, we think it's about a 16,000 square foot addition to the high school, and we've estimated $600 a square foot, which is far beyond any of our other projects. We're a little over 500 for the high school and in the high fours for Lincoln. So we believe that 600 is very attainable.
Now, to go back to the issuance of the bond, the question that I have on it is, currently it's being advertised that there might be a realignment in the federal education department, elimination of it. And with those concerns, you know, is it wise to move forward with the issuance of the bond when we might not know where our funding's coming from? And what would be the impact if we didn't issue the bond? Would there be a decrease in the taxes for the community, or?
Long-term, there would be a decrease in the bond service rate, yes. So, because ultimately you're paying back less money, right? On the front end, and if you, turn on the slide.
Well, I'm just saying, you know, if we don't,
Mm-hmm.
one, then we're just paying on what we borrowed.
Mm-hmm.
Then, in theory, the taxpayers would see some relief also, correct?
Eventually, once we get to that point in the repayment process where the bond rate would drop, yes. Yes, and so when you talk about the federal money that comes for education, none of that is for capital projects. So
Understand.
that is for either, it's all ed fund money.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just saying with everything up in the air,
Sure.
where it's at right now, we don't know where funding would come for the schools. I understand the bond's a
Yep.
separate issue. But when I've talked to people out there, you know, there is growing concerns because we don't know what our tax rates are gonna be doing. You know, we don't know how it's going to be administered or distributed from the state if it goes through with that. That's why I'm saying, do we really want to proceed forward when there's so many unknowns?
I think we do. And the reason why I say that is because we are looking at the bond rate, which is going to be something different than the ed fund rate. So when we see a loss from the federal government, so I want to say 8% of our income comes from the federal government. And so when we see a loss in that income, it's going to it's going to stress the ed fund. So then at that point in time, we have to make some decisions as to how are we going to handle the loss of revenue in the ed fund. But that's to me, a whole separate issue than the bond itself. And so we can't grow a community and meet to me, this is an essential project. And so we can't grow our community and meet some of the essentials by just looking at what potentially cuts are going to be from the federal level.
Well, I mean, it's a valid concern that,
I think
these are questions that have been posed to me.
Absolutely.
So,
I think, you know, when we know that our funding for our food program comes from the USDA, and if they cut that, then what's going to happen with that? I think it's truly a valid concern.
I think I would be in agreement with what you're saying if I thought what we were spending it on was frivolous. The media center is not frivolous, in my opinion, as an educator.
I agree. But we took that out, that was in here.
I'm sorry?
We had one here at one time.
Yes, we did, but in order to bring, so what happened was, with that, is that the Nelson campus lease was expiring. So we were in a situation where we had all of these students going over to the Nelson campus, and now we had to find a place to put those students as the lease of the Nelson campus expired. And so we had to bring those students back to the main campus. And we were in agreement about that. So then at that point in time, we built out classrooms in order to house the full sophomore class. And so in order to do that, we gave up media center space with the objective that we were going to recreate media center space. And that's something that we discussed in 22 and 23 before you joined the board. So I don't expect you to know all of that, but just to give a little bit of history to Lynn as well, and to Bob, is that we had some long-term objectives, and one of those was to rebuild the EHS Media Center.
I'm not against that. I'm just saying there's a timing for things.
Absolutely.
And when there's so much unknown looking forward, we have to be very tactful in which we move forward with. And if we're going to issue another bond of $10 million, that's money that has to be repaid. So I understand what you're saying. I like the idea of the media center. I'm just concerned with the spending, and I agree, Jennifer, that we have to make sure that the spends that we do have a return on investment. So objectively, we have to look at each one of these.
All right, so now I'm going to go, since we just talked about the media center. So this was the schematic that was developed during the phase 2 portion of the bond in April of 2023. So obviously our Commons edition doesn't have that curved kind of mirrored approach that we first started with, but it generally gives you the idea of what it would look like. So it would go over the back between A wing and the B gym. Enclose that area. That enclosed courtyard would, number one, add to our safety of our campus, but then also create a fixed outdoor dining space that would be kind of an extension of the cafeteria and the media center. So imagine that as a go-between. Also gives you another thoroughfare from the A wing into the CDB area of the campus. So now that we've got the new hallway coming through the new Commons, there's a new entry point there. We have the original entry point, and then this would be a third that gets you from one side of the campus to the other. So where we are currently in terms of time frame, as I mentioned, February 24th, we'll be bringing that recommendation for bond approval. We can certainly bring more information related to federal funds and impact if the board would like that. And then we have an initial planning meeting with architects to discuss kind of the start of space planning. In our initial conversation with them, we envision groundbreaking sometime around this time next year, in that December to January timeframe, and then the opening of that campus to be in December 26, January of 27, about a 12-month build project. So that gives a year for design, planning, and bidding, and then a year for construction.
One last question. Since the original issue of the bond in 2023, how many of these projects that we currently have going are completed?
Are completed?
Completed
As of today or as of the summer?
as of today.
As of today, they're all underway of the phase 1 projects, and the Midway project is complete.
So
And the entries, half of the secure entries.
Yeah. Everything else is underway and bid and committed.
So, the $10 million. So, we issue the bond, and then you start meeting with the architects to decide what it's going to look like. Now, in our retreat conversation, there was a whole cascading decision matrix. And part of that decision matrix was whether the media center encompassed classrooms. So I assume that we'll be presented with options for the price tag of media center and media center with classrooms.
So the media center would have included some classrooms regardless. So, yeah.
No, I understand
but-
that.
But the
there
numbers of
was-
classrooms.
In the
and-
conversation, though, it sounded like there was a, how big of a media center
Mhm.
do we want, how big do we want that
Mhm.
to be? And I think that's a fair discussion as far as the total dollar amount, because, I mean, if there's an opportunity to use that 10 million for some other additional projects that
Mhm.
didn't make it, I mean, that could obviously factor into, so that decision matrix.
As we go into space planning, we can certainly bring something back to the board and say, kind of, here's where we are.
Yeah, because
So-
we were gonna also go back and take a look at the budget for
Mhm.
sort of those other,
For all those other
for
projects.
all
that we-
those other
yep.
things we were talking about.
Yep,
So I
and we're
think
working on that right now.
We need to kind of start seeing how that's all gonna play out.
So, and if we look at the history of the bonds and interest, just from that graph that you gave us, in 2019, it was 82 cents, and 2023, it's 77. And then I think Mr. Courtney just said that for this coming year, for the fiscal year '24, it will be 74.
Mhm.
So we're seeing, because of EAV growth, we're seeing a little bit lower bond obligation as well.
But again, moving forward, we've forecasted a very conservative EAV growth because we believe that eventually will come. Other questions on phase 2 and bond? All right, stay tuned. We'll bring more back when we have more information about phase 2.
Okay. So let's move on to action consideration items. At this time, the board will move to action considerations, approval of action item 3.1. Dr. Shelton.
Thank you. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve personnel matters related to the resignations and retirements of employees as presented.
Is there a motion
Move to approve.
and a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Sanderson,
Yes.
Patey,
Yes.
Della Riva,
Yes.
Brumback,
Yes.
Fund,
Yes.
Ahart.
Yes.
Approval of action item 3.2. Dr. Shelton.
Thank you. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve personnel matters related to the appointment, employment, compensation, or transfer of employees pending required certifications and professional educator license, completion of paperwork, and all background fingerprint checks completed and cleared as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing no discussion, Carrie, will you please call the roll?
Patey,
Yes.
Fund,
Yes.
Della Riva,
Yes.
Brumback,
Yes.
Sanderson,
Yes.
Ahart.
Yes.
With no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.